All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. It's Friday. Looking forward to the weekend. Hope you are too. Also looking forward to today's live stream. Got a little bit of a late start today. Usually I try to do these at noon, except on Mondays with Arlen. That's because Arlen's on the left coast and he likes to get his day going just a little bit later than 7:30, 8 o'clock, which is when he'd have to be ready, or at least have to be getting ready for the live stream at 9 Pacific time. So we go at 2. Just a little bit of details, a little bit of logistics. So we go to 2 as our normal start time. Not always, not invariably. Normal start time Monday is 2 p.m. We go for an hour. Other days, I try to start at noon Eastern time and go for 1 hour as well. The reason it matters on Halitics when we start, especially compared to other live streams, is because I take calls. I want you to call. It's really important to me to talk to you. I present my views, but I also want to hear what yours are. They inform me. They help me clarify where I am and sometimes revisit my positions. They're not always right. I get that. Of course, we're all subject to biases, subject to preconceived notions that prove not to be the case. I will not necessarily learn that unless I hear it from you. So it's really important to me to talk to you, and also that helps us come to some consensus, I believe, on how to move forward, how to address the most serious problems we face in our society, and they are serious in. Fridays are the free-for-all, so that basically means I go over topics that I had previously touched on during the week. Of course, if something really important comes up, I'm going to talk about it. And also, it's really your opportunity to weigh in on any topic, not just, I prefer, yes, talk about, you call in on what is the topic du jour, but they don't have to be. They can be the topics de la semaine, topics of the week, or just what really matters to you. I do want you to subscribe if you haven't already. I saw that 10,000 subscribers is considered success. If you have a channel with 10,000 subscribers, then you've, quote, succeeded, unquote. Of course, we always want to get more and more, want to get more people. I'm only at a little over 200, so I got a long way to go. Please help me get there. And one way you can help, if you already are a subscriber, just let other people know about what I'm doing here. Ask them to subscribe if you think this is the kind of content that they would appreciate, that they would enjoy, find valuable. And okay, I wanted to get back to a topic. Did I talk about it yesterday? I know I focused more on Raskin yesterday. Corporate divisive partisan hack. Don't sugarcoat it, Al. Tell us how you feel. I'm not going to talk about Raskin today, at least unless you call in. I did talk in the second half hour about this really I think it's extraordinary assault that occurred at the University of California Berkeley Law School Dean's home. His name is Erwin Chemerinsky, and I struggled with that. I got to be honest with you. I was like, is it Chemerinsky? The dean there, Chemerinsky, well-known liberal actually, and his wife, Professor Catherine Fisk, law professor, open their home up apparently every year. That's part of the kind of graduation ceremony, procedures. Hey, let's go to Chem's house. And I've learned that they call him Chem, right? Apparently, or Chem. Maybe it's Chem. Chemerinsky, so probably Chem. But it wasn't all roses, sunshine, and six-figure starting salaries for the soon-to-be credentialed Cal Berkeley law student, third years. And so you can see from this picture, Professor Fisk was not happy with the woman who is wearing that hijab on her head. Let's play this video one more time. I showed parts, I showed kind of a different video, but of the same event yesterday. This is much briefer. I really want you just to see the confrontation that occurred a 3 days ago at Cal.
Where millions of Muslims around the world fast Not only from material sustenance,
This is not your
fast
house.
not only
It is
from
my
material
house.
sustenance,
Stop touching her.
fast.
Stop touching her.
We have attorneys.
Stop touching
We
her.
have
Get her to leave my
attorneys.
house. Okay, you don't have to get
Excuse
aggressive.
me.
I'm not
Please
Please
touch
leave
me.
our house.
Hey,
You are
don't touch
guests
me.
at our house.
So she was absolutely being aggressive. She put her arms around when I say she, the law professor Fisk put her hands right. I mean, she started, say manhandling, which she was woman handling this woman, and all the woman who was accosted was doing in that moment was to discuss Ramadan. So it to me is quite extraordinary and utterly unacceptable that this happened. And I get the argument, right? Well, and I'm just playing it without the video, so you can see she's got her hands all over her. Now, we'll play a little bit from Robbie and Brianna on The Hill Rising because I wanted their take. I'm not going to play where Brianna Joy Gray says she had her in a chokehold. I wouldn't call it a chokehold. That's a little exaggerated, but she had her hands on her. She had her hand near, Fisk had her hand near the woman's neck. This is not acceptable, and I don't understand why anyone would say it was. This is a guest in her home. She was not being violent. She was not being aggressive. She wasn't even talking in that moment about anything controversial. We were just talking about Ramadan. I know they were afraid she was going to touch that third rail, Israel's genocidal actions in Gaza. But hey, shouldn't that be exactly what is discussed at these dinners? I think that's the most appropriate conversation you could have. I don't understand why there would be any, refusal to allow this to happen. And I get that Cem and his wife don't agree. They don't share the view that Israel's wrong, that Israel's actions are immoral, that Israel's evil in this moment, that Israel's activities are evil. I get they don't believe that. And I actually don't. I get they don't believe it. I don't get how anyone doesn't see it that way. To me, it's so obvious. It's so clear cut. But okay, they don't see it that way. Engage, right? Discuss it. Present. If you're the dean of the most important state law school, the flagship law school in California, the most important state law school in the country. One of the most important, powerful, influential institutions in the entire world. That's who you are. You can't engage a student on a critically important issue? I don't get it. Now, here's a tweet. I actually got this again from The Hill Rising. We'll play the video in a moment. But apparently this tweet really, really upset Chemerinsky. And you can see it says, my dinner with Zionist Chem. So Chemerinsky, while Gaza starves. Yeah, okay. Well, people are really upset. 33,000 dead Gazans. And yes, you are having this posh event at your beautiful home. You'll see in the video, well, you saw in the video, beautiful, bucolic scene in incredibly expensive California Bay Area. And you're, refuse to even engage. Now this was tweeted before, I believe. Oh no, this was. So I don't see why this is so. That tweet got people's hackles to such a degree. I get the knife and fork. Yeah, it's a little strong. It really is. It's a little much, maybe. But people are understandably very, very, very upset. Friends, family members, folks that, share their ethnicity are just being slaughtered with the assistance of the U.S. government. And Chemerinsky supports this policy. So how is this inappropriate? I don't understand. All right, let's play, because I do want to get that video from Robbie and Brianna and kind of go through how they respond. I think it's kind of interesting. It's kind of, it's instructive as to how we deal with this stuff. Before we do, yeah, just go ahead, click subscribe. Would really appreciate that. That's how I can keep going. And really, you know, hopefully we can make a difference together. That's what I want. I want us to make a difference together. See if that happens. Hopefully it will. So let's get that video up here. It's just going to size things here so that you can see it perfectly. And hear the debate, because I think they kind of put it in an interesting context here that reflects maybe different views, neither one that I really fully agree with, but present kind of a different world view of this that's maybe more mainstream than my own. Here we go. Well, I don't hear the audio. Why don't I got it. All right, we'll start it again in a minute. Folks, just one sec. Somehow, for some reason, mute me. This is so frustrating. Sorry, folks. Yeah, that's the thing we're dealing with. And I thought I had this set up, solved. The problem has been that YouTube is making it really, I don't know whether they're just spending less resources or what have you, but they're making it more difficult to just play their videos directly. So what I'm doing now is I'm going to record the video, you know, to actually download the videos myself and then play them directly from the file. But even that's proving somewhat problematic. Get there. I'm fully optimistic that at some point. So let's just play it here. We'll go from this point where I've got Brianna on. It's pretty much where I want it to be.
He said that his students could no longer receive academic credit for working for any journal that had adopted that bylaw.
So what Brianna Joy Gray is talking about, why people were targeting Chemerinsky in the first place, that he had issued a decree that students who worked for, I guess, what he would call anti-Israel, anti-Semitic publications couldn't get credit for it. That did not go well with Palestinians and other who are critical of Israel and feel that they're genocidal, colonialist, oppressive, persecutory, and they want to fight against those policies. Chemerinsky said, sorry, you don't get any credit for it. We're not going to recognize any work you might do for an organization that's critical of Israel.
So basically punishing students for their freedom to express themselves by working for a journal that the journal, now all these degrees of separation, had adopted the bylaws that said that they would not invite any speakers who were Zionist or pro-apartheid.
Well, he said he considered it anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
So.
Right. So he thought that tweet, you can see Chemerinsky thinks that tweet there is anti-Semitic because I guess the knife and the fork, and he had talked something about the bloody knife and fork. There actually isn't blood on the tweet, but on the fork and knife, but maybe he perceived them, or maybe the red in while Gaza starved. It's all accurate. And you know what? I've said this before. Maybe you really believe it's anti-Semitic, but you know what? Unless you know it, unless it says, let's kill all the Jews, Hitler was right, something to that effect, then I think we should make the assumption that people are making arguments in good faith, that they're not just biased against us as a people. And even if maybe they are to a degree, they might still have some legitimate points. But what so many do in our political system, and you saw this with Raskin there, I said I wasn't going to talk about Raskin, is you assume the worst about somebody. You assume that their motives are bad, or maybe sometimes some of their motives are bad. And you use the fact that they have at least some bad motives to completely ignore everything they say, to dismiss them, to cancel them. Well, I don't think that's right. I think we have a duty to listen to our fellow citizens, to our fellow Americans, to people around the world, and engage them in good faith when their arguments are legitimate, are good, are decent, even if maybe they're not the world's best people, even if maybe on some issues they're really, really wrong, even if they're global warming deniers. Well, I'm not going to engage them. That issue's done. We know the planet is burning up because of human activity. That's done. But I'll engage them on Israel. They want to criticize Gaza. They want to criticize what Gaza did. Let's talk about it. They want to talk about, like so many Trump supporters do, raising tariffs to bring back good manufacturing jobs. Well, let's talk about that. Even if I don't agree with you on the climate catastrophe that humans are clearly causing, you may well have very good points when it comes to bringing good manufacturing jobs back. I'm not going to cancel you because we disagree on one issue. And I understand that's what a lot of people on the left want to do because they don't want to hear about areas where they disagree, where they don't agree.
And moreover, also from this LA Times report, he has, this is another pattern. He characterized students who referred to Israel as a settler colonialist country and who argued that land should be given back to Palestinians as anti-Semitic, saying that he thinks that the total elimination, that means that there must be the total elimination of Israel, and that is in and of itself anti-Semitic.
All right, so it isn't, right? It isn't anti-Semitic, but that's what some people say. And my response is, you're the dean of a powerful, influential law school. You have a duty to listen to what others say. You have a duty to entertain other viewpoints. And when there's so much suffering, so much victimization by Israel of Gaza, then you don't get to just simply say, we aren't going to hear what you have to, we're not going to listen to you. You don't get to do that. You shouldn't get to do that.
So this is the background for the focus on this dean in particular.
Well, look, he has not particularly endeared himself to conservatives.
Right. So now what Robbie's going to say is, well, all right, so he's been too far to the right on Israel. That's what you on the left say, but we don't like him on the right either. So what? I mean, what relevance is that?
Either there was some video that Christopher Rufo circulated of him basically promising to continue to use race-based admissions or consider race-based admissions and just not let people know about that. So I actually see a lot of conservatives saying you reap what you sow here. But regardless of whether I...
All right, so I didn't understand that comment by Suave. You reap what you sow. In other words, is he saying that the Palestinian woman or those who are criticizing Israel are just affirmative action admittees, that they're only there because they somehow got some sort of advantage in the applications process that they don't deserve? Because I didn't really understand his comment. He's like, oh, well, you let in people who aren't qualified to be at the law school, so therefore you have to deal with them now? Makes no sense. That's a crazy argument. I don't get that one at all.
Agree with his views on those issues or any other. I don't think people should go to his home, hijack his dinner, and start shouting about Gaza and then refuse to...
All right, so she didn't do that. The dinner wasn't hijacked. She was speaking about Ramadan, and she wasn't even shouting. She was speaking in a normal voice. So he's totally overstated what really happened. I bring this to you because this is about the best competition out there for my program. These are about the two best hosts out there, and they do complement each other pretty well. They provide various views. Here's what they don't provide. They don't provide a true economic analysis of the situation. Brianna Joy Gray so often focuses on identity politics, on identity, not on the economic factors at play. not at power dynamics, but at identity. And Suave, I don't even get where he's going. This is all purely partisan. You're either left or right, and if we don't agree with you on the right, then therefore, and the left doesn't like you and the right doesn't like you, then it's okay. I don't. It makes no sense. I can't even really understand his view here. In the end, though, he comes to this point. You don't get to interrupt the dinner. I don't understand. Why not? Why shouldn't you? This is a law school event. This is a state, if not, maybe funded. I don't know if the law school, if Cal paid for this or not. But I don't know why you wouldn't get to interrupt it. Seems like that's what the student should be doing.
Leave when asked. According to the laws in California, if you are on private property and you do not leave when asked to do so, they are allowed to use force to eject you.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a very limited to a degree. I don't know, and whether her force was over, excessive. There's a whole bunch of arguments there. It looked really bad. It was wrong what she did. You don't put your hands on a guest at your event. You just, a student who is in the end making a very legitimate point about what Israel's doing. So I can't. This nonsense has to be, responded to. But I want to play one more point, because this is, I think, a good reason that so many of us, and not even as much me, but so many Americans find all of these conversations bizarre and really missing the point. What these professors are doing, these law like Fisk, and why there's so much suspicion of what's going on in law schools and in higher education altogether. So here's more from, I guess, Brianna Joy Gray.
I don't think this little older lady putting her arm around the student and trying to
around a little young girl.
Yeah, I don't feel that it was physically threatening, but
do you think it's appropriate for teachers to put their hands on students?
I don't think it's appropriate to start screaming about whatever you want.
All right, but do you think it's appropriate for teachers to put their hands? Do two wrongs make a right? Are we doing grade school analogies now?
I don't have any problem.
Back and forth. So to the issue, though, of what professors are doing and how absurd the state of higher education that some of these elite institutions must feel to so many Americans. I want to just get to a little more. See if we can get it.
Defended it as it's private property. I can do what I want. The Equal Protection Clause does not apply here. I think that's an interesting framing. Is this really a question of what they have a legal right to do, as I was alluding to before, in excluding anybody from their property? Of course they do. The question is why this person was excluded from their property. And given that the intervention from the law professors started before she had even said anything about Palestine, I do think that raises really bad optics on the part of these law professors. It's also worth noting that the wife in particular, Fisk, teaches in what are considered to be generally very progressive areas of the law: employment law, labor law, civil procedure. And again, this is unverified, but someone had pointed out, someone who has knowledge of her class said that she does land acknowledgments, and that.
So the land, I wanted to stop that. So the land acknowledgments is really something you see a lot in left spaces. Is when you have a meeting and before you start, or I guess a class, you say we acknowledge that we're on land that was stolen from the native people. And I've always thought this was absurd. It does nothing for anybody. I guess it instills a little guilt. It doesn't change anything. It doesn't make life better for indigenous peoples, the descendants of native tribes from this country. It doesn't improve the quality of their life in any way. It's purely performative. It's meaningless. It's like it's just purely self-righteous. And it presents, again, it's divisive. It says, okay, the native people are the victims and we're the victimizers. But it ignores, like, white people, colonialists are the victimizers. ignores all the whites who are also victims right now, who are homeless. It's such a bizarre kind of response, these land acknowledgments. And I see it all the time. And I'm like, wow, this is really what you think is the way to address injustice in America, is to have a land acknowledgement? And what Brianna Joy Gray is saying is, okay, so this Professor Fisk does land acknowledgement, but when a push comes to shove, she's pushing and shoving against a woman who's demanding justice for people, for her people. And Brianna Joy Gray is right to make that point. I don't think she really, the problem I have with Brianna Joy Gray is I think she does have no problem with land acknowledgement. She just doesn't like them being used in this kind of a pinkwashing way.
Kind of super lefty behavior in her class. So the asymmetry between her choice of course of study and perhaps her classroom behavior, if that report is accurate, and the kind of intolerance that was on display at this dinner is pretty remarkable. And I do think speaks to the
100%. Really important to note. You've got somebody who presents herself as a liberal, as progressive, a champion of the oppressed, does land acknowledgments, and then when it comes to a Palestinian who's clearly, demanding some kind of justice for her people, she's attacked. She attacks her. The professor who does the land acknowledgments attacks her.
Virtue signaling superficiality of some of the
Exactly.
people who work at these institutions that are supposed to be liberal bastions.
I mean, that's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is the unreasonableness of the progressive activists who, even a professor who does land acknowledgments in their class, if that is accurate, again, I have no idea, is still considered the enemy and is subject to these hateful posters, and you're going to...
So Swami's position is that somehow because the professor does land acknowledgments, she must be an ally. No. Totally wrong. I see this a lot. Like people say, well, I don't know why you don't like Biden. You say you like Bernie, but you don't like Biden. But really, they're almost in a complete agreement. No. There's some virtue signaling by some Democrats that is meaningless. We support policy. If you're a true progressive, you support policies that make life better, that directly impact on poor, struggling, and working people. Land acknowledgments do none of that. They're pure virtue signaling, as Brianna Joy Gray says. And for Suave to say, oh, well, because she does virtue signaling, she's a lefty, and therefore she must be on the side of the Palestinians, is crazy. There's no connection there. And I have so many other stories. I really wanted to get to a bunch. Well, we got a half hour left. So just a few other things. By the way, I hope you'll join me, 240-242-5646, 240-242-5646. Like I said, if you're a progressive, you want to make things better. And I saw this meme. I don't know if I have it, where somebody, oh yeah, so let me do this. So I saw this on, posted by a friend of mine on Facebook. And it really struck me. Women often are victims of violence by men. There's just no question about that. I'm not like always big on identity politics and people presenting because I'm a member of this particular identity group, I'm a victim, right? I don't think that's true. I don't think if you're a woman, you're a victim. I don't think if you're an African American in America today, you're a victim. You might be more likely to be a victim. It might be more the case that you're going to be impoverished is higher, then you're a victim. You live in your car, you're a victim. But I don't think the fact that you are a descendant of a slave makes you a victim. It's what your situation is today that determines whether you're a victim or not, whether you're truly being faced with unfair, unjust circumstances. So I don't think every woman is a victim. There are women who are billionaires. They're not victims. In very few cases, maybe some are victims. Who's the woman who did Lean In, Sheryl Sandberg? She's not a victim. She's incredibly privileged. She's elite. She's at the top of the food chain. She's not a victim. Hillary Clinton's not a victim. But there are women who are victims. There's a significant number of women who are victims. There are women who are victims because their spouses, their boyfriends, their significant others, their girlfriend maybe, they're violent. They beat them up. They hurt them. That's a victim. Somebody who is in a situation where they can't escape being hurt, harmed, persecuted. Gazans are victims right now. Israelis aren't victims. Gazans are victims. Some women are victims. More women are victims. Many, many, many more women are victims of domestic violence than men. So if you want to address this problem, I think that's good. Then you're a progressive. How do you do it is what matters. Having a land acknowledgement isn't going to change the fact that there are many, many women on Indian reservations who are victims of violent, abusive spouses and significant others who are alcoholics, who are angry, who are bitter, are resentful because their situation is so unfair. That's not going to change it. Doing a land acknowledgement isn't going to improve the situation that a woman who's the victim of an abusive spouse faces on an Indian reservation. But I'll tell you what will address their problem. It won't solve everyone's problem. It won't eliminate domestic violence. But if you really cared about this issue, you know what you would do? You would support a much higher top marginal tax rate, and you would support a much tighter social safety net. So this meme, I wanted to show this because it got a lot of controversy on Facebook, and it's wrong. Now, I liked it. It says corporate tax rate 90%. That's wrong. Under Ike, it was the top marginal income tax rate, personal income tax rate, PIT. That was at 90+%. The top corporate tax rate was still high 50%. I don't know what it is now, 20%, something like that. I'm not sure. It's a little higher than that. When you reduce the advantages that the people who have the highest income have, and you guarantee everyone has enough, which we didn't do in the 50s. We started to do it in the 60s. When everyone has enough and no one has too much, then people who are victimized by abusers have more options. They can leave because they have resources available. There are places for them to go. Everyone has enough. But when you allow wealth, power, influence to gush upwards, then you make people very, very dependent, even for survival, for their own survival, for their children's survival, on a spouse, on a boyfriend, on a girlfriend, on somebody who is making a salary. And not only are you dependent on them for survival, you don't really have any resources of your own. There's no guaranteed housing for you if you have to leave. There's no guaranteed health care for you or your family. There's none of that in a society where everyone's on their own. So if you really cared about eliminating domestic violence, then you would support higher taxes on rich people. You wouldn't be whining and complaining about how evil men are. I mean, you could do it, that's fine, but that's not going to change the reality. The way you change the reality is you guarantee that everyone has enough and no one has to. And then the violence against people who are weaker, less aggressive, it wouldn't be eliminated. It'll never be eliminated. We're human beings. We have bad tendencies and good ones. But if everyone has enough, they can escape. They have many more options for escaping. They're less dependent. And not only that, but the victimizer who is often themselves, in reality or perceived, a victim of an abusive supervisor, boss, living in very bad circumstances, facing a downward economic trajectory. You take away that dynamic, they will be less likely to be violent. Not sure why this is a controversial one either. I really don't. This kind of came into my mind when I saw this story. I'm not going to show not this story, but the story where the O.J. Simpson died, right? He recently died. I don't know, just a few days ago. 76 years old, and so O.J. I think I'm pretty damn comfortable saying is a killer, right? Killed his wife, killed the man she was with. That was back in, was it 93, 94, something like that? 94, I think. Maybe it was 93. 94. Murdered her with a butcher knife. Murdered the man she was with. And now we see he might have, and this is no surprise, right? I mean, I should have thought of this. I don't know that I ever really thought of this, but the Atlanta Journal-Constitution says, did he have concussion trauma, CTE, chronic traumatic encephalitis, right? The brain swells, you get all sorts of mental problems as a result of getting hit in the head repeatedly since you're a child. And he had played youth football. He played football his entire, until he was in his mid-30s when he retired. And the doctor says, hey, look at all the violent episodes. Look at the, bizarre behaviors that we observed. Look at the fact that just about everyone who ever plays, football at a high level, college, pros, has some damage to their brains. So CTE may well have been a significant factor in OJ's killing his wife and the friend, Ron Goldman. Now, I'm not saying that as an excuse. Still responsible. He's still responsible. But football, this violent sport, makes people more violent even when they're not playing it. And so tying that to the issue of domestic violence, obviously they're connected, but also reducing wealth and income inequality, they all go together. This is a man who grew up in a very poor background in San Francisco. I don't know if they were desperately poor, but I believe they were not affluent, not even comfortable. Football was the way out. And you could argue with me, and I think it would be a fair point. OJ grew up in the 50s and 60s in a much more progressive time when it came to economic justice. There was far less wealth and income inequality in the 60s and 50s and 60s than there are today. But he still grew up relatively impoverished. There still, even with much higher top marginal tax rates, there was still massive wealth and income inequality. And you know what else there was? The fact that if you played football, you're a great football player, you're a stud, you're a hero. I mean, everyone's throwing themselves at you. Even if OJ wasn't facing homelessness or desperation, being a football star made his life a lot better in all kinds of ways. So it's not going to end the attraction, the appeal of football if we reduce wealth and income inequality greatly. I get that. It's not a panacea. But it means that there'll be less of a desperate need to put your life, your very life at risk, to make yourself into a violent monster, at least when you're on the field and maybe off the field. The pressure will be reduced if you're if you know you'll always have enough, but you still won't get too much. It also would have meant, presumably, and his wife was affluent. She came from a rich background. She could have escaped him. So again, it's not perfect, but much of the violence, in other words, reducing wealth and income inequality greatly won't eliminate the violence against women. But being married to OJ, or I really can't speak for Nicole Simpson. What I can say is that Nicole Brown Simpson. What I can say is this. For people who are trapped in violent relationships, when we greatly reduce wealth and income inequality, they will be able more easily to escape, much more easily to escape. And if we greatly reduce wealth and income inequality and poverty through those high top tax rates and war and poverty, if we do that, then there'll be less violence. People will be less violent. Look at societies where, there's less poverty, there is less violence. It's just that simple. These aren't hard problems. If we want to solve them, we can do it. That's why I call Raskin a partisan corporate divisive hack, because he makes it worse by talking about Trump all the time, not focusing on the real issues that Americans face. I wanted to show. So that's what you do. If you really care about the problems facing Americans, you fight for economic justice. You fight to reduce income and wealth inequality greatly, and poverty. That's what you do. And that is why I think people look at these law professors like Chemerinsky or Professor Fisk, who does land acknowledgement. So many Americans are like, what? What kind of nonsense? What kind of craziness is that? And this kind of came home to me when I saw this article. This whole, and it's kind of like, this term has really irritates me, sex assigned at birth. And you can see, I Googled it. I was like, well, who's talking about assigned at birth? Apparently, there's an article in the New York Times this week, I think, an op-ed about some professor saying this is we shouldn't use the term sex assigned at birth. And that's, whether it says male, female on a birth certificate. It's not assigned at birth. You're not assigned sex at birth. You are either male or female from conception. With a very, very tiny number of people, vanishingly small, maybe less than 1 in 1,000, I believe, that maybe the doctors are confused. Doctor gets it wrong. They don't assign you. They look at you and they say, okay, because you have a penis, you're a boy. Because you don't have a penis, you have a vagina, you're a girl. That's it. That's not assigning. That's based on the reality of the situation. And there are, admittedly, a vanishingly small number of people whose physiological appearance at birth may not reflect their sex. But as you can see, even back in 2018, when these, not so long ago, researchers confirmed, and the science daily gets it wrong, it's not just about the XY chromosomes, but involves a regulator that increases or decreases the activity of genes. That's false. It is just about the XY chromosomes, and that's exactly what this article says. There's no doubt. And you can see, right, this is from the article. This is from what the actual researcher says. It is the chromosomes. An embryo, it's this simple. An embryo, and it's determined at conception because the male, the sperm carries either the X or the Y. And if it's a Y, then it's a boy. XY is a boy. XX is a girl. XY is male. XX is female. period. End of story. That's the sex. And that is always determined at conception. Now, what can cause, in those very, very small cases, some error by the doctor is if there's low levels of this other gene that doesn't cause, if it's an XY, doesn't cause the testes to develop. That's where there could be confusion. I want to be very, very clear. This is not about trans. Trans females are XY. Trans males are XX. It's not about whether there was some disruption or some disorder of sexual development in very, very, again, very, very tiny few cases. The gender is based on the brain. It's on how your brain views or perceives your sex. But your sex is fixed from conception, period. So when people start talking about sex assigned at birth, it's ridiculous. It's not assigned at birth. It's determined at conception. And yet you have a professor writing for a very prestigious law journal, and this is Professor Clark. And this all came to my mind because it's where these professors just can't, why there's so little regard, so little respect for, I think, among many Americans, so much contempt really for so-called elites. Because you have someone like this Professor Clark, and it says here, so this was in the Columbia Law Review 2022. And I liken this exactly with the bland acknowledgments. It's pure virtue signaling. This does nothing for transgender people. This has nothing even to do with transgender people. A transgender person, their sex is their sex, period. You can never change it. They cannot change. One cannot. That's the reality. So none of this has anything to do with being trans. Your sex is what your chromosomes say it is, period. End of story. But this kind of virtue saying, oh, look at me, I'm on the side of trans people. I want to change science. We're not gonna assign, we're not gonna deter, there's no such thing as biological sex. That's what you can see it. This is what Clark is trying to do. Change meaning to something that is clearly false. Sex assigned at birth is intended to displace the concept of biological sex. It's not a concept. Biological sex is not a concept. It's the reality. It is the way things are. It's sort of like flat Earth is intended to replace the concept or displace the concept of a spherical Earth. No, the Earth being a spheroid is not a concept. It's the way it is. It's the reality. So, but I guess it's like this is like a feel-good thing, like, oh, well, if you were assigned male at birth, but you feel like you're a female, then you really are a female. There's no such thing as biological sex. It's nonsense. It's absurd. And this is why people are like so disgusted by this kind of elites. And I will say beyond that, it's why many people question even the idea of the climate crisis, the climate holocaust, which is proven. You might as well doubt Galileo. You might as well doubt Einstein when you doubt the climate holocaust. It's simply physics. It's pure physics. It's been proven. It's been demonstrated over and over and over. Everyone can see a greenhouse. You let light into a greenhouse, but you don't let the warmed air inside the greenhouse escape. It gets hotter in the greenhouse than outside because the atmosphere is closed. Well, that's exactly what the greenhouse effect is. We burn CO2. It allows the sun's rays, the radiation of the heat of the sun, to come to the earth and warm the air that's close to the earth, but less of that heat goes out through the atmosphere because of the CO2. It's physics. This isn't like, oh, well, we're going to replace the concept of biological sex. No, they're totally different. But because some elite professors come up with this crap, this garbage, and some law review editors publish it, that absolutely causes some people to question the reality of the climate crisis. And it's very, very unfortunate. I try to address that here. I try to cut through all of that. All right, it's just about the end of this program, 240-242-5646. I'll still take your call if you call. But let me just real quickly touch on Ukraine. And one of the things I've said, if you are going to take issue, if I'm saying, hey, I want things to be better. Somebody says, hey, I want things to be better. I think a good way to address I guess Israel was attacked, right? So let me not be me. Let me be some sort of ardent, aggressive Zionist who says Israel was attacked by Hamas, and Hamas is supported by the Palestinian people, and they're hiding in the Palestinian, and they're hiding in Gaza, and they're using Gazans as human shields, and so we just have no choice but to go in and kill every last Gazan. That's the only way we'll ever be safe. So an Israeli says that, and I'm not saying, or some really, really, really extreme right-wing Zionist says what a lot are really feeling. Hey, they're animals, we get to kill them. They raped our women, even if you say no, they didn't. They murdered our concert goers. Yes, they did murder some concert goers. That's absolutely true. So the only solution we have, the final solution, is to wipe them off the planet. So I could say, well, that's so ridiculous. That's crazy. That's BS. Go away. And it's, of course, I should say that. But the fact is, Israel was attacked. People were killed. That is a problem. We should deal with it. And when someone brings that up as an issue and presents some ridiculous solution, I think it's fair for me to reject it. But it's even better for me to come up with a different solution. People often said, well, what do you propose? If you don't like Israel going into Gaza and just shooting up the place and killing people, what do you propose? And I always say, well, I propose a one-state solution. Israel should go and say, we're very, very sorry. We've been oppressing and persecuting Palestinians for 70 years, 75 years. We're going to stop doing it. So I do come up with a solution. I criticize those who say it's okay for Israel to kill Palestinians, but I also provide a solution. So if you're going to criticize the solutions that I come up with, I think it's incumbent on you to come up with an alternative, unless you really don't believe we're facing a problem. You say, well, that's not really a problem. So I say we need to do something about homelessness. And if you say, well, I don't think it's a problem that people are sleeping under bridges and begging in the streets, then you don't have to come up with a solution because you don't think it's a problem. I think most people think that's a problem. So if you're going to say you don't like my solution, which is much higher taxes, guaranteed housing, build government housing, change zoning laws, reduce wealth and income inequality, you don't like those solutions, well, what is yours? I don't think any of us disagree that right now what's happening in Ukraine is a terrible problem. Donald Trump has come up with a solution. Solution is we go to Russia, we go to Ukraine, and we say, look, stop it, put down your machine guns, put down your bombs, down your rocket launchers, and we'll just make the border what they are. Russia keeps Crimea, Russia keeps Donbass, or they're demilitarized or something we talk about, we figure it out, but basically we stop. Leave things the way they are. I think on balance is a pretty good solution. I don't think it's perfect. There's things we tweak, we have to address it. But yeah, I think that's a solution. It's not absurd on its face. But even if it were absurd on its face, then what is your solution? What do you say differently? Because we've got to come, don't we want to do something? Unless what we're just doing is trying to show Putin who's boss, which is what I hear over and over. We can't let Putin get away with this. We can't let Putin get, what do you mean? So to tell Putin, how is sacrificing 50,000, 100,000 more Ukrainians not letting Putin get away with it? I don't understand that. So the response, I don't put people's names on when I do this. The proposal that you're backing, which is negotiation, changing the borders, recognizing the reality that Crimea is under Russian control, recognizing that the Donbass, at least the eastern part of the region, is Russian majority, Russian speaking. As far as we can tell, they seem okay with being Russian. Putting in some kind of a demilitarized zone, maybe some sort of UN frontier. Yeah, I back that. I think it's better than what we have now, for sure. Especially because the West provoked, to a significant degree, the attack by Putin. So yeah. And then once we have peace, we work with Putin to try to, bring about a little more freedoms, a little bit more self-determination for people. Especially those who aren't Russian speaking and don't want to be part of Russia. Work out ways to address that. We can do that much more easily when there's peace. We can't do that when there's shooting and killing and bloodletting. So I'm like, okay, you don't agree with what I'm doing. What do you suggest? And I didn't show the response, but the response was ultimately, we just keep doing what we do. We just have to keep it up. We just have to keep trudging through the muck was the exact response. And the point was, our other option, and this is the solution that the poster promote, is to do nothing. What he's saying, well, there's two options. We either keep doing what we're doing or we do nothing. So we keep doing what we're doing. That's the solution. We keep doing what we're doing. Okay, that's no solution. That's led to 2+ years of warfare, hundreds of thousands of dead, billions and billions and billions of dollars lost. Land, areas are now completely uninhabitable. That's not a solution. You don't have a solution to a terrible problem, then don't criticize other solutions. You don't have any other proposal. You don't have anything else. Don't criticize other solutions. Now, obviously, there's always a caveat. The caveat would be, well, if the solution is so bad, so wrong-headed, so misguided, that as bad as this current situation is, that would be like the Nazis, right? Things were bad in Weimar Germany. They weren't perfect in a lot of ways. But the solution, the Nazis, was a lot worse. Get that. Is the solution that Trump is proposing, which is land that is currently controlled by Russia, that is occupied by Russia, is saying, okay, you can keep that for now? We're going to stop the killing? Is that really worse than endless war? Trench warfare? One that, by the way, we're not winning, if you want to say we are the Ukrainians. So again, and there are terrible problems out there. You don't like one person's solution, then come up with your own and explain why it's better. All right, that'll do it. I hope you have a great weekend. I'm Hal Ginsberg. It is Halitics. I'm going to try to address some of the technical issues we faced today a little bit more, try to figure out how to do videos a little bit more smoothly. And maybe, I think the audio was fine today, but if it wasn't, it will be better too. Have a great afternoon and have a great weekend.